First came the exit polls. Then, less than an hour later, a second shock for the French. On the heels of the far right's record score in European elections, Emmanuel Macron dissolving parliament Sunday night, calling surprise snap elections. Since losing his outright majority after his re-election as president in 2022, Macron had muddled through with a mix of compromises and executive decrees. Now suddenly comes a lightning-fast three-week campaign before a June 30th first round. Just how risky a gamble can Marine Le Pen's party ride the wave and win an outright majority? It's a tall order in a country where a two-round voting system safeguards against the extremes. But then again, who thought her National Rally party could win 89 seats last time around? We'll ask why a growing number of women and young people turned to the far right, and how much France's return to the polls will resonate beyond its borders. What impact on Europe and beyond? Which way will the pendulum swing today in the France 24 debate? We're looking at Macron's gamble. With us from French member of parliament from Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party, Eleanor Carrois. You represent the French abroad. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
She is a member of parliament for the left-wing France Unbowed party, Danielle Obono, whose district is here in the French capital. How are you?
Yeah, fine, thanks.
With us from Marseille, former National Rally candidate Enzo Alias, president of the Patriots Network, which coordinates between far-right movements across the globe. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And our Brussels correspondent, Dave Keating. I guess there were 27 nations voting, but France did steal the thunder on Sunday.
France certainly stole the thunder last night. That was the big story of the day.
We'll be talking more about you. Also, we'll be crossing over to James Vezina, who is outside the Green Party headquarters, where the left is trying to coalesce, and Lisa Kamenoff, who is outside the National Rally's headquarters, where it's Le Pen, the two Le Pens meeting. They're from different parties, but from the same family. We'll tell you that story coming up. Your reactions on the hashtag F24debate. No French president had dissolved parliament since 1997. That is, until now.
It is a situation to which I cannot resign myself. The rise of nationalists and demagogues is a danger not only for our nation, but also for our Europe and for France's place in Europe and the world.
That was Sunday night. This Monday, Macron traveling to the center of France for 80th anniversary commemorations of the mass slaughter of civilians by the Nazis in two towns, retaliation against the French resistance after D-Day. The president sticking to his schedule as if it's business as usual, but it's not. Andrew Hillier has the story.
Emmanuel Macron's roll of the dice has been described as one of the biggest gambles in French political history. And the stakes are massive.
This election will have the most far-reaching consequences for France and the French people in the history of the Fifth Republic.
According to media reports, a tiny circle of advisors spent months working on the high-stakes plan. By putting it into action, it could draw attention away from his crushing electoral defeat in the European elections, focusing minds on the upcoming battle for the National Assembly. Analysts say Macron is moving to reclaim the initiative by calling the National Rally's bluff and forcing it into an election faster than it had hoped. So what are the possible outcomes? This is the scenario that Emmanuel Macron would like to see, a snap election that jolts voters of different political persuasions into rallying around a mainstream candidate to halt the gains of the far right.
It's a very risky gamble. The so-called Republican vote against the far right has been largely eroded. At these elections, they even gained new voters.
Another possibility is that no one party wins anything near a majority, leading to a messy parliament for the next 3 years and making it even harder to pass legislation. But there's another possible outcome: sweeping far-right gains. That could lead to what's called cohabitation in France, when the president is forced to appoint a prime minister from the political opposition because it's the only candidate capable of winning the backing of the National Assembly.
Eleanor Carrois, what was your reaction at 9 p.m. when the president dissolves parliament?
To be honest, I was really surprised. I wasn't expecting this to happen at this very moment. And I think, like everyone else, surprised and also wondering what was going to happen next. But I think when you actually are willing to give a voice again to the people, when you listen to them, when you actually, just acknowledge that they voted massively in a way that is not the way you've been defending, then it's also a good thing to just let people express themselves. And I'm confident that the French people are not for the far right and that these elections will be very different from what we saw last night. I was very disappointed.
20 days, is that enough for you to change the momentum?
You know, I actually have a very particular situation because I had to go on elections twice already in these 2 years because my first election was annulled. And I think there's no time frame that is the right time frame. I think people said something last night and it was important to listen to them. And now we have to go. And it's our responsibility as politicians, as women and men involved and engaged for their countries to go and ask them what France they want. And I can't resolve myself to think that it is a France that would be governed by the far right. So I'm going to fight this one.
Daniel Obono, did Emmanuel Macron do the right thing dissolving parliament after the far right scored, well, nearly 40% if you tally up the two parties there?
I think the right thing should have been for him to resign because it's his defeat. He's the one who's been elected in 2017 to oppose the far right. And over the past 7 years, he managed to help them gain more MPs in the 2022 elections, and he decided they were the only legitimate opposition to him. So he is the one who is totally responsible for what happened yesterday, which was not a surprise. We need to remind the people listening that the far right had won the 2019 European elections. We knew that there, and the entire system, political system, media system, actually campaigned for them to be heard. When you see how many airtime Jordan Baldera got and stuff like that. So it was not so much a surprise. He chose to do that because he doesn't take the responsibility that it is. And so he's saying, so the National Assembly has to go, but I stay. And I think he has the power to do that. We're in a system that
Are you happy? I'll put the question to you differently. Are you happy that Are you happy that he dissolved Parliament?
It's not me about being happy.
Was it the right thing to do?
We've been saying that that was a possibility he had. We've been saying that's the reason why we argued with colleagues on the left to say that we need to unite for the European election, because if we had been united, we could have been head to head with the far right. We would have been maybe even ahead of them. So that's the reason why we've been saying that we have to build and strengthen the coalition that made possible for us to be elected in the first place in 2022. So now he did this, and we've always also said that we don't fear the people's voice, and we're ready. We've been ready since we've been elected. But let me also point one thing, that over a year ago, there was a massive social movement. The overwhelming majority of the population was opposed to the pension reform. It didn't dissolve the National Assembly at that time. Then he decided to do this,
right, so now
obeying the far right and making possible for them to win. We will oppose them, and I think we are the only one able to oppose them. But it's his defeat and its shame in history what has been happening over the past 7 years.
We're going to get into how different blocs get into battle formation in a moment. First off, Enzo Eliès in Marseille. Were you surprised as well? And your thoughts on people are saying European elections, a one-round system, proportional voting. It's not the same as parliamentary elections, which are effectively, there's 577 seats. It's 577 individual two-round elections. That it's going to be a completely different game. Is it?
Well, firstly, is a historical decision about Macron, but of course, is Macron defeats. And I'm pretty happy about this dissolve of the National Assembly, because if we look the opinion polls, the National Rally maybe will have 250 deputies, so it's really good for us. And also, if we have this number of deputies, maybe Jordan Bardella can be the prime minister to work to make France great again. So, of course, it's not a proportional election, but I'm pretty optimistic because the people have to wants to make a Macron defeat. So I think for this election they will do the same thing.
All right, so you're saying you have the momentum and you will continue to carry that momentum. Dave Keating, in Brussels, how was Macron's gamble taken where you are as you watched election returns come in from the four corners of the continent?
For sure, there was shock and confusion when that news reached people in the European Parliament, where I was last night. And there was lots of chatter about why he had done it, what he hoped to gain, what the gamble was about. I mean, I think that what's important to keep in mind here is that not just in France, but everywhere, people tend to use the European Parliament elections as an expression of discontent with the national government over domestic issues. That's why opposition parties usually come first. Usually governing parties don't do well in these European Parliament elections. And it may be that Macron's gamble here is that he's trying to call the bluff of the citizenry in a way, saying you may be willing to vote for the far right in the European Parliament election, but you won't be willing to do that in the national election. Basically, he thinks maybe he thinks people take the national parliament more seriously than the EU Parliament. And also, as you just mentioned, there are different rules for that legislative election. It's not proportional representation. It's 2 rounds instead of 1 round, so it's less easy for extreme parties to do well in those national elections. And there may be higher turnout. It's interesting to note that actually the last legislative election had lower turnout at 47% than this EU election, which had 51% across the European Union. And I think the gamble here is that because normally those legislative elections have been happening right after the presidential elections, people are tired of voting, they don't go. Maybe more people turn out this time. I don't know, they may be tired of voting because they just did it in the European Parliament election. So there's a lot of what-ifs here, and everybody here is just trying to digest what it all means.
All right, but let's take a look at the outgoing Parliament. In June of 2022, the French voted for roughly one-third. Emmanuel Macron had been re-elected in April. Less than 2 months later, it's what could have seemed at the time like a hung parliament. There you see his center is in yellow and various shades thereof. The left, which had coalesced, it was an alliance called the NUP, or the NUPES, depending on how you pronounce it, which lasted until just a few months ago when it broke apart. We'll get back to them trying to piece it back together again at this point. And then various shades of blue you see on this graph. The remnants of what used to be the Gaullist Party, the Republicans of Nicolas Sarkozy, and the far-right National Rally. 20 short days of short campaigning ahead. Now comes time to do deals. Marine Le Pen sitting down with her niece Marion Maréchal, who led the rival Reconquête list in the European elections. If they unite, they had their first series of discussions. Chances soar of the far right making the second round in individual constituencies or winning seats. Lisa Kamenov is outside National Rally headquarters. So from what we're hearing, Lisa, they had a first meeting, the two Le Pens, to try to reconcile differences, and there's more to come?
Yeah, so as you said, Marion Maréchal came to the National Rally's headquarters, and after her meeting with Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, she came out looking rather happy, rather satisfied, and made a few announcements. She said that this first stage of talks with the National Rally was for her an opportunity, a historic opportunity to start constructing a majority in the National Assembly. She also said that this was her extending a hand out to other right-wing parties who are willing to look into forming a right-wing coalition and who are willing to cooperate. She said she's always defended this idea of having a right-wing coalition in the Assembly, and she also said that this would not be her last talks. They will be having more meetings. She has a lot more meetings set up during the week with other right-wing politicians such as Éric Ciotti and Nicolas Dupont-Aignan. Now, it's important to remember that when Marion came here, she came representing only herself, not the Reconquête party. This is due to tensions between Reconquête's Éric Zemmour and Marine Le Pen, but she clearly wants to move on from this because Marion said it is time to go and talk to Éric Zemmour about trying to find ways to integrate Reconquête party ideas into the right-wing coalition, and if that doesn't work, then Reconquête will have to walk these elections alone. So she was heavily hinting that she might leave. So it's looking like the next 3 weeks for her will be very busy in the lead up to legislative elections as she tries to rally all the right-wing parties to form a coalition.
And the deadline day for rallying those, for submitting candidacies is Friday. Lisa Kamenov, thank you for that update. Let's turn to the left. It's also time for, I guess you could call it, speed dating coalition talks. James Vezina is outside the headquarters of the Green Party. James, what's the latest where you are?
Well, look, after for 3 hours, really, of waiting, finally, there's sign of the Socialist Party. We'd seen pretty much everyone from the left come here to meet in the Greens headquarters behind us. The Greens, who are looking to try and reform that alliance that you were just talking about earlier on, that the NUPES that fell apart recently, that didn't manage to hold up, and as a consequence of that, well, every party's been left with its own small percentage of the votes. But the aim today is to try and recreate something, a group that's going to hold weight in the next elections to come, a group that can, what they'll be trying to do is stop the far right from finding any power there, and also for trying to claim as much space as they can on their side. Now, for the Green Party, this is extremely important because they've had pretty much lost over half of their seats in the elections overnight. They're down to 5 seats now from the just over 5% of the votes. So a disastrous campaign for them. It takes them back 20 years in terms of those results. Now, the most important for them is, of course, going to be the Socialist Party, which they were expecting to see over the next few hours, who they were waiting for so impatiently in a way, because the Socialist Party have managed to re-grasp a bit of voter attention, 13%, well over 13% of votes. That was not the case last time round, where it had pretty much disappeared, but now the Socialist Party does have some weight in that, and it's going to be very important for the coalition. No talk yet about what the position is with France and Balde LFI as to whether they would be able to form an alliance together. They're talking right now as we speak behind, but of course there are differences between all of them, of course. So between the French Communist Party, LFI, the Socialist Party and the Greens, the aim is to reform that bloc. But for now they've been very secretive, and I think we're given that the Socialist members have just turned up, but it's still going to be a little while before we get any indication of what the first talks after the shock results for them last night will be leading to for now. But still very vague then, and we'll try and see whether we can find out anything for the moment, yes.
James Vezina, many thanks for that live update. So there you have it. People trying to get into battle formation. Again, Friday's the deadline for candidacies. 20-day campaign. It's very fast. And last time around, National Rally, biggest opposition party, 89 seats. But because you had a coalition, the left was a bigger opposition bloc. LFI Member of Parliament François Ruffin seizing the initiative bright and early this morning. The journalist turned left-wing politician says his calls for unity have been heard by the socialists, the communists, the Greens. But what about the leader of his own formation, Jean-Luc Mélenchon?
What about Mélenchon?
We don't have an answer yet from Emmanuel Macron. France Unbowed is welcoming this popular front.
All right, so he's talking about Emmanuel Macron, who took the seat of Mélenchon when Mélenchon decided not to stand for parliament last time. Is Jean-Luc Mélenchon okay with doing a coalition? Why didn't he say Mélenchon there? What is there a problem?
But if you've been following what we've been doing and building over the past, over now a decade, we've been the one fighting to build a united front. We've been the one after the presidential election and when Jean-Luc Mélenchon won 22% of the votes, who actually invited all the other left party and managed to build this coalition that got us first at the first round of the
this coalition building
election.
The question is, does this coalition have the blessing of Jean-Luc Mélenchon?
It's not about blessing. It's about we are in a position. We need to fight against the far right, and we need to defeat Macron's policies. And we've always been responsible politicians, and we've been saying we need to do that. We've been calling for united front for years now. So it's our own proposal that has been taken again, and we say, okay, let's do that. And that's why we called for this meeting. We are the one who called for the meeting that is happening right now. So we've been saying that we have a solid program, and we need to go
so
ahead.
So there are no leadership tensions within your party?
La France Insoumise has always been there to fight against the far right on behalf of the people and for a radical program, because what's important for us is the program, the radical program
Daniela
that
Bono,
we need
the question
to put
is, are there leadership tensions right now?
We don't have any leadership tension because our leadership is about the program and what we're putting forward, so that the people and all of the people who are, including like physically, who feel like they are physically threatened by the far right and their racist and xenophobic policies, feel like there's somebody who's fighting for them and will defeat the far right. That's what we have to say. It's not about the in-between supposedly leadership fights. It's about the people who are waiting to fight back against the far right. And we're ready for that. We've been ready for years for that.
Eleanor Carrois, is this going to be the same kind of campaign as in 2022?
What I hear right now in this on this set is very hard to believe. I recall in June 2022, when we were all elected, Mr. Mélenchon, who had not been a candidate, say, let's go all march over Paris and get the power. I mean, he has definitely a problem with accepting the result of the elections. The LFI, his formation, made a relatively bad score, especially compared to the Parti Socialiste, which actually made a very good score.
We doubled,
talking about Sunday's European elections.
We doubled our number of MEPs. So please, you're not in a position to give any lessons. No, I'm not aggressive.
No,
I'm angry because this is your responsibility.
So,
if there's a far right at such
if you let me finish,
level,
I will just
one at a time.
You're talking about us.
I think I was asked.
I wasn't talking about your defeats.
I am talking about you. I'm talking about
you.
One
at a time.
Don't talk about us.
Please,
otherwise
the viewers
you got your own problems to solve.
Look, I was asked about.
Let us fight against the far right.
You know, this is a perfect demonstration of how the LFI operates.
Sure.
And I think if you want a healthy democracy, you need to have a responsible opposition. And the truth of the matter is, the LFI is not a responsible opposition. When you see them, what they do, how they interact, how they act in the Assemblée Nationale, and you see the proposals that are made by Les Verts, by the Socialists, how we work with them, how we also work with the Republicans, you see that they've been actually silencing their, so to speak, well, that's my perception. You may have another one, but just the way you react, makes me think that you really have an issue with sharing the power and with actually respecting the voters'
you know
decision.
What happened yesterday?
Well, yes, Raphael Glucksmann made a very good score.
For the past 7 years.
I'm not going to comment on them because they really have an issue.
I can't stand hearing something from you. You've been in power.
I've been asked about.
It was not about us.
Well,
it's
it was
about your responsibilities. You've been in power for the past 7 years. So excuse me, if I'm a bit angry about the fact that I'm a black woman in this country and the far right may win because you did that. So excuse me if I'm a bit angry about your responsibility.
Look at what we get every day.
My family
I'm not surprised that the French.
My family feel threatened. If you don't have anything to say about that, and you are in power.
Right,
That's the problem
question
in this
was,
country.
the
So
question-
please, don't talk about us. Think about your own responsibilities.
I just think this
The
is
question
so
was whether
clearly
this-
illustrative.
Please.
The question
of the
was whether
ways-
this will be the same
Okay?
campaign
Exactly,
You're
and
not, you're not
and
going
I
to be
think-
targeted by the racists
Please, one
and
at
the
a time.
xenophobes. You're
One at a
not
time.
in danger. Our people are in danger. So please,
One-
tone down your arrogance and think about your own responsibilities for once in your political life.
I'm shocked by what I'm hearing.
one
be
at a-
shocked
one-
all you
I
want.
am
One at a
shocked.
time, please.
I am shocked,
Please.
because I think this type of behavior, like personal aggressions, pointing fingers at someone on a TV set, is exactly what French people don't want to see anymore. They clearly
been
sent a
defeated.
message. They
You
clearly
are the one who's
can
been
I can I
defeated.
just say what
Please.
I think? I think they sent a real message that they wanted a different kind of left opposition, that they wanted a different kind of left. That's why Raphael Glucksmann, in my opinion, made such a good score. This is my interpretation of the score. And I think something that is really clear from these elections and from the past is that they can't stand anymore the permanent show that you are making at the National Assembly.
Where is Emmanuel Macron's margin for, we're talking about coalition talks on the left, coalition talks on the far right. Where's Emmanuel Macron's margin for doing deals? Is there one at all?
The issue here is reuniting the different MPs and the different parties that are willing to work on a progressist agenda, that are willing to work on a program. It's also about ideas that are, first of all, defending Europe. This is part of our DNA. And second of all, defending the program and the policies that we've made. And so the idea here is actually to call on every single MP that is willing to work with us. And I think it is really important to recall that over the past 2 years, we have worked with the Greens, we have worked with the Socialists, we have voted things that they've proposed on what we call the niche parlementaire, but we have been unable to work with you, and we have been unable to work with the Rassemblement National because our ideas are so extremely opposed that this is impossible. So this is where it is. It's the Acte Républicain,
So the
and
great
clearly
result
they
you
exclude
got
themselves.
yesterday, you don't have anything to say about the great result you got yesterday. This is a failure in a gigantic
I said it at the very beginning,
so you don't
but
have
for
anything.
you,
So it's
and
our
did you
fault.
win yesterday?
We
I'm
doubled
just saying,
the number of our
Look,
MEPs.
I'm not
Let's
gonna
take a look.
continue
Let's
this.
take a look at the.
But this
Let's
is
take a
this is
look
what
at.
we get every day at the
incredible.
Assemblée.
So it's
I
everybody's
can't
fault
wait
but
for it.
yours. It's everybody's fault but yours.
Well, you're
and
just saying
especially
that
our fault.
it's since the beginning of this set, you've been saying that it's exclusively Macron's fault. And I found
Let's
it
take
so
a look at the
caricature,
issues.
and French
Let's
people
take.
don't wanna
Let's
see it
let's not take a
anymore.
look. Let's not take a look
You're
at people.
unbelievable.
Let's not take. Please, Danielle Obono. Let's remain civil. Let's not take a look
I've been civil. I can be worse than that. So I've been civil.
Let's take a
Wait,
look
that is
at the issues that have been tops for voters. According to Ipsos's exit poll for France 24 and other media, now the war in Ukraine coming in a distant seventh. This is a multiple choice survey, by the way. So what you're seeing in dark blue is the issue that ranked tops in the minds of the voters that were interested. And we're seeing that spending power is the top issue, followed by immigration. But immigration is listed as the #1 issue in nearly a quarter of the rankings there. Before I turn to Enzo Alias about this, Dave Keating, what we saw in France as well, with this, I want to show all the slides from the Ipsos exit poll, but is a stark rise in the number of women and young people who voted far right. Has that been the case across the continent?
It has, actually. There's been a number of articles about this over the past couple weeks that we might have assumptions about who is voting for the far right. But we see actually in the three biggest countries, Italy, Germany, and France, all three of which had very big votes for the far right yesterday. We are seeing a lot of that support coming from younger people, particularly in Germany, although there is more geographic difference than there is actually age difference in terms of how people are voting there, who's voting for the far right. This is a trend we're seeing, and it's coming along with kind of the normalization of the far right, which has been the big phenomenon, that a lot of these parties are rebranding themselves, are trying to take some of the more toxic elements out, or at least make them less visible. And if we're looking at the way that young people are starting to vote more for them, that strategy does seem to be working. That difference in presentation. And when you're looking at the European election in particular, all of these far-right parties have taken out of their platforms any notion of their countries leaving the European Union. Since they've seen the effects of Brexit, that has been a complete reversal from all of these parties, which is quite really surprising, especially when it comes to a party like AfD in Germany, whose whole raison d'etre when it was founded was to take Germany out of the euro. All of that stuff is gone now, and I think that has also helped them win over more young people who don't really support the idea of their countries leaving the European Union, because that's the only way they've ever known things.
Enzo Elias, let me ask you, what is the top issue for you?
Well, we will see if we can make a coalition. For example, Jordan Bardella already say he's agreed to work with Les Républicains, but Eric Ciotti is not available to do it. So we will see. We already know some individual Les Républicains deputy wants to work with the National Rally, so we will see. And also, I think Marion Maréchal will be the best bridge to make maybe a coalition with Reconquête, but it's not really simple, because Éric Zemmour was always attacking frontally the National Rally. So with Marion, maybe is the best option. And for Dupont-Aignan, he already, for the last election, called to vote for Marine Le Pen. So I think we can find a way, and the Les Républicains have to make a choice, a big choice, because if they don't do a coalition or an alliance, a deal with the National Rally, they will help again Emmanuel Macron.
And there are irreconcilable differences, are there not, when it comes to things like whether or not your side supports the Ukrainians after Russia's invasion?
Well, I cannot speak in the name of the National Rally, so obviously it's better to ask directly to them. I'm just president of Patriot Network, so I cannot speak directly in the name of the National Rally, but I know National Rally supports Ukraine. They just want to send defensively weapons, but not offensive weapons, to don't go frontally in a war with Russia. It's not directly in the French interest to be in war with Russia.
Let me ask you on this question, Eleonore Carrois. The war in Ukraine did not rank highly in the minds of people when it came to EU elections. Will it be different when it comes to the legislative elections?
It is hard to say, but I think it's going to be not the top priority again, because obviously internal matters will matter most. And this is a national election, but it's also a very local election. So there are lots of local issues that will probably prevail in this election.
Daniel Obono, how do you explain the fact that so many women voted far right this time, so many young people did?
I think if I may just point out two things you've been saying in your polls. The idea that the young people vote more for the far right, that's...
The 18 to 25 voted for your party first.
Yes, that's what I wanted to point at, to see that it's not like just young people are turning far right just like that.
It's just that the numbers are growing.
Yeah, the numbers are growing, but also it's not just a normalization of the far right so much as a shift to the far right for the entire political spectrum. When you hear the Les Républicains talking, you would, it's as if it was a far-right RN member talking. When you have the government concluding an anti-immigration law with part of the far-right program in it, and that's what they've been doing last December in January, that's what has been happening. And I want to point out also, it's important to show that what people are concerned about are their living conditions, are the state of the social services. Those are the issues that we have to give an answer to in order to mobilize them. And also something that doesn't appear anymore, because that's the way the far right has been able to rebrand itself. But the question of racism and xenophobia and anti-immigration rhetorics and stuff like that, that's also one of the reasons why it's like normal. Everybody can, push down on immigrants and saying that they are the cause of everything that's going wrong in this country, although they are not in power, although it's been decades of the same anti-social policies, anti-environmental policy. But the target and the scapegoating on immigrant people, that's one of the driving forces that help the far right. And I think we have to address that and to be clear about those issues. And I think that's the way we can fight back. And I know this country can fight back against the far right.
Eleanor Carrois, did Emmanuel Macron make a mistake by keeping on his law and order interior minister, who makes these far right noises in a lot of his speeches, talking about being tough on immigration, tough on this sort of thing? Should he have had a more tempered view?
I think you have to be realistic. I think a lot of our constituents want more order in general, and this is not a matter of immigration at all. And I have to say that it's very clear, and it's not the way we think in my party, or I think. I think it's very important that we also listen to the French people that are telling you, well, it's not normal that if you commit a crime, whoever you are, you're not arrested for it, or it's not normal that, you know, you have more and more degradations every time you have any kind of demonstration. You have the 1st May demonstration, which used to be a very pacific march. Now you always have shops being destroyed and turned apart. So I think that needs to be listened and addressed. Now, whether it was a right move or not a right move, I mean, this is not for me to comment on, but what I think it's important to listen to what people are saying, why they're saying it, and you need to respond with a progressive response. And I think the response must also always be, you have to be responsible for what you do, not for who you are. And this is what we've always said, and this is our line.
It certainly seems, though, that there is this tightening that's been a platform of many a party. At the EU level, the Conservative EPP of outgoing EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she's been making deals with the likes of Egypt and Tunisia to keep migrants away. She's riding the wave of strong showings in Germany and Spain on Sunday. She won't need far-right votes to strike another grand coalition deal, as you can see from this pie chart in front of you. But the far-right's #1 standard-bearer consolidating her position. We're talking about Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, finishing tops in Italy on nearly 29%. Next, she'll be welcoming on Thursday the world as Italy hosts a G7 summit in Puglia.
And I'm proud that we are heading to the G7 and to Europe with the strongest government of all. This is something that has not happened in the past. It's happening today. It is a satisfaction and also a great responsibility. We must be aware of that responsibility.
Enzo Alias, what's the difference between Giorgia Meloni and Marine Le Pen? Why don't they sit in the same voting bloc in the European Parliament?
Well, I think Giorgia Meloni is more liberal than Marine Le Pen, and also she's ready to be in alliance with von der Leyen, and Marine Le Pen is not. So I think it's a big difference between Marine Le Pen and Giorgia Meloni. But also, yes, they agree about immigration, about culture, about identity. So maybe they will work together. I don't know the issue, but I think the National Rally is agree and ready to work with every patriot MP in the European Parliament.
Dave Keating, if you're a betting man, what are the chances of their, because seeing some kind of a grand coalition, I hark back to what we were showing earlier, those images of Marion Maréchal. She sits with one voting bloc in the European Parliament, that of Meloni, and Marine Le Pen, who sits in another.
Yeah, I think that it just doesn't seem to be in Meloni's interest to take Marine Le Pen up on her offer to unite these two groups because, you know, frankly speaking, the ECR is in a much stronger position than Marine Le Pen's ID group, even though ID, if AFD goes back into it, it's going to be numerically larger. But if we're looking ahead to the group formation process of the next weeks, ID is really just National Rally and a couple of other countries. It is so strongly held by Marine Le Pen's party, and they're going to be very preoccupied over the next month with this legislative election. I just don't see how they're going to scoop up all of these non-aligned MEPs. I really think they're going to go to ECR. Meloni is president of the ECR. She's been very skillful in getting a lot of parties to leave ID and go over to the ECR, like the Sweden Democrats, parties like this. So I think Meloni is really riding high at European level. Le Pen is not. And the history of ID in the European Parliament has not been one of very much effectiveness. They just haven't really accomplished very much. They're largely ignored. Whereas the ECR, and this is the key difference, I think, between Meloni and Le Pen, the ECR has shown up. They have been a much more effective far-right force in the European Parliament. So I would really question, what does Marine Le Pen have to offer Giorgia Meloni?
Yeah, which is the more potent force, Daniel Obono? Is it Giorgia Meloni's ECR, or is it the ID of Marine Le Pen? Which one do you see as more of a potential threat?
I think both are a threat to democracy. There are differences, of course, but within the far right, there's always been differences and histories, and some come from Mussolini's like Meloni, and the others like Pétain, like Marine Le Pen is more like Pétain and those traditions, those far right traditions. So to me, they are a threat to democracy in Europe, to the very fabric of our society, which are multicultural society, despite whatever they want to think and how they obsess about. And for us, it's not a matter to choose between who's the lesser evil. They are adversary to everything we stand for, which is equality, democracy, and togetherness as European societies.
You agree, Eleanor Carrois, that they're the same, even though they sit in different voting blocks?
I think more important than to know which one is more dangerous or what effect it has is to understand why people vote for them. And to tackle the far right, you need to understand why people are attracted to their simplistic ideas, why they end up thinking that it's a good choice. And again, I think there's no responsible opposition. I think because there is also such a mess in the other opposition, there's this temptation to go into these parties that are extremely dangerous. And if there is a collective failure of the European elections yesterday, and I think we have to acknowledge that and take action in these next 20 days, is that we were unable to show the French people how dangerous they are in their ideas, in their essence, in what they carry with. And this is something that every single politician that believes in progress, that believes in Europe, should carry.
Well, Dave Keating, the markets are nervous. They're down, especially here in France. After this dissolution of Parliament. France right now has got a deficit that's equivalent of, what, 5.5% of GDP? And there's the sense that with these elections, no matter what the outcome will be, there's not going to be much belt-tightening ahead.
I think that's the markets are pricing in the very real possibility of split government, of either cohabitation or a legislative assembly that's even more unworkable than what Macron has been working with up to this point during this term. So I think the markets are purely looking, they always want stability, right? And this, I think that announcement yesterday was really the opposite of stability.
All right, second round of French elections, by the way, taking place July 7th. Opening ceremonies of the Paris Olympic, July 26th. Organizers unfazed this Monday by the scenario of a far-right French prime minister welcoming the world.
Here in France, we have always seen a great unity among all political parties, and behind these games from the very beginning of the candidature. We always considered this to be kind of a miracle. To have such unity, and I have no indication whatsoever that this unity will break now, just a couple of days before the games will open.
So there'll be an Olympic political truce?
Look, I think nothing is above the voters, nothing is about the French constituent and the French people, and I think it's important that during these 20 days we convince them not to vote for the far right.
Danielle Obono?
Well, I think the most important thing is opposing the far right and campaigning against them and building an alternative to them. So there will be the Olympics, and we make sure that France that welcomes the world is the France we can be proud of.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Enzo Elias, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Marseille. I want to thank Danielle Obono, Eleanor Carrois.
Can I say just one last thing? In the Americas, the vote is on July 6th.
Oh, early vote. That's
early vote, the day before. It's important to remember.
Okay, yes.
Everyone needs to vote.
The French abroad voting earlier. Thank you for that. I want to thank as well Dave Keating, our Brussels correspondent, who has not had much sleep, I think, the last 48 hours. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.